If I gave you $200,000 to pick up and leave and move from where you are living, what would you do? Would you pick up and leave? I would. Heck, some people would even streak naked for $100. That's all it takes. Well, I'm on the location of Rego Park, right in front of this tall building. What was Macy's. And in the early 60s, Macy's was a building, and they built this structure, and they wanted to expand. And well, in the 60s, you know, it was a lot different. Queens Boulevard, what you're looking at, was completely different than what it is now. And, you know, Macy's wanted to expand, take advantage, bring in more traffic into this area. You know, Queens Boulevard completely changed. And where that HSBC building is, it was the home of a family who had bought the home back then in 1922 for $4,000. And here comes Macy's in the early 1960s saying, listen, we need to build. We're going to buy a house from you for $200,000. Do you know how much $200,000 was back then in the 60s? A ton of money. It's a ton of money now. So the Sedneks was the family that had that property, and they refused to go. Everyone else on this block at that time in the 60s, when Macy's wanted to build, they all left. They left except for one family who did not want to leave, even if it was for $200,000. And they stayed, to the chagrin of Macy's. I'll give you a little backstory of this whole situation, right? And why didn't they sell? You know, that's the mystery we never really solved. One neighbor, you know, back then told the New York Times that she just wanted to start and end her life at the same place, although she actually bought the home when she was 24 years old. Newsday reported that Susan refused to sell her yard to Macy's because her dog needed that area to run around and her son Victor said he didn't really want to discuss it further, that it was a private matter. That home was eventually sold where HSBC is in the 1980s when the family sold the home to the development, once the last surviving member passed away. And it was turned into a strip mall. It's now a HSBC. And coincidentally enough, even though this is a Macy's furniture store, it's not the actual Macy's. They wound up moving just a few blocks that way 16 years later in 1996. You look at this main road here in Queens Boulevard. When they moved in here, on Queens Boulevard, off Queens Boulevard in 1922, it was much more rural now than the street that you see today was being built up. one lane each way, sparsely lined with farmhouses, stores, churches. Looked like the country. But once the Queensboro Bridge had been completed in 1909, and the road was being transformed into the main approach from Queens to Manhattan. It was being widened into the multi-lane, multi-section road that you know today. So in order to accommodate the widening, the buildings on the south side were being demolished or relocated 50 feet to the south to make way for the new wide road. Luckily enough, the Sednek house, to them, was on the north side, and they didn't have to go. So the Sedneks were you know, in that time they might have been considered, you know, heroes. There was really nothing unusual about that family, nothing special. Hungarian immigrants, both families came into the U.S. in 1898. Bought the house on Queens Boulevard in 1922 for $4,000. Just $4,000. So the house, as you can see where HSBC is, that's where the house was. The house was situated in the middle of a block of houses between Broadway and 56th Avenue. That's 56 straight ahead. 56 actually this way, I'm sorry. Broadway and 56. You know, but that, you know, that changed when a new road, 55th Avenue, was placed right through the block. In order to build the road there, 3 buildings to the west of the Sednek house were demolished. 55th is next block over. Now, if that house had been a few more feet to the west, it might have been gone. And well, it might have saved Macy's a lot of headache. You know, they had at the time, you look at the odd-shaped building, 6 levels of story for you know, vehicles, which it is. So that plan, part of the plan worked. You know, everything was ready to go. But again, she refused every offer. Macy's had really no choice but to adjust its huge circular store so that it stayed out of the Sednek's airspace there. So everything had to be adjusted. And you know, and Macy's cost, that cost them $50,000 back then. Because, you know, and they thought that they would just pick up and leave and sell their house, which they didn't. So that cost them another $50,000, which is a ton of money back in 1960. And because they didn't want to move, couldn't demolish the house, they couldn't put up, you know, they wanted to do a plaza on the corner, landscape plazas. They just said no. She stayed in that house right next to Macy's for about 15 years. 15 years. I would say it's probably right next to where Citibank is and HSBC. 15 years, that plot of land. She passed away, like I said, in 1980. Just imagine that. Saying no to $200,000 thorn in the side of Macy's, as that building, as their house was located, right where Citibank HSBC is. They had no choice. Couldn't do anything. They thought that they could buy her out for $200,000, and they couldn't. Sometimes money does not talk. For me, it does, depending on the situation. I guess that same thing happened with the Sedneks. Can you imagine that? 200,000. What can you do in 200,000 in the 1960s? A ton. But yeah, no thanks. No, thank you. And as we're strolling up the block now, you can see this place is a lot different than it was in the 60s. And that's it for this video. Thank you for taking a peek. Hope all is well, and look forward to speaking to you guys very, very soon.